All right, well, welcome everyone. Once again, we are doing our training to encourage employers to hire, attract, and retain employees over 50 and those with disabilities. So today we're going to be learning about ways to do that. How can we attract them? What are we doing that keeps people from, keeps employees from looking at companies? Last time we talked about job descriptions and that kind of thing. And we'll talk about what Voc Rehab can do to help. Patricia is here to talk about the EEOC and what reasonable accommodations are. Karen is going to talk about the AIMS program that helps employers figure out hiring older workers. And Chris will talk about his experience at Bayaud with hiring people who are 50 and over with disabilities. So we'll go ahead and get started, and we will begin with Miss Karen from AIMS. And I'll make you the host so that you can share
Once
your.
I get that, I'll just flash a couple slides up there.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
All right, let's see here. Slideshow. Okay.
And if everyone else wants to mute, just so we don't get any weird interruptions for Karen.
Okay. All right, we're gonna get here. Here we go. There. I'm just assuming everybody can see that. Great, perfect. So Karen Brown, I am the Colorado liaison for the Age Inclusive Management Strategies project. That is a project of the University of Iowa and Transamerica Institute. Transamerica Institute is a nonprofit, the nonprofit arm of the Transamerica Corporation. And we're funded by the Next 50 Initiative, which is a foundation here in Colorado. I think Bayaud's received some funding from them as well. So we're going to talk just a little bit about the aging workforce, just general information about demographics, hiring experienced employees, why there's value to that, touch on COVID and some of the impacts it had on workforce issues, and then dive more into the Age Inclusive Management Strategies project itself, how we select policies and examples from our work. Many of you may be familiar with this whole concept of changing demographics. In fact, this is a slide taken from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it shows the labor participation rates from 1988 to 2016. You'll note that the 25 to 54-year-olds, that upper line, shows a pretty consistent number, somewhere around that 81, 82%. But if you go down to the 55 plus, the 65 plus, and the 75 plus, you'll see significant increases in each one of those populations. So it's showing you that there are more older people are choosing to work longer, some because they need to, and some because they have to. One of the other big changes relates to the fact that we have fewer younger people entering the workforce. So the birth rates over the last 20 years have actually been declining. Actually, I think it was 2021, right after COVID, Bureau of Labor Statistics came out and indicated that we actually have the lowest birth rate that we've had in 40 years. So far fewer young people, which was our traditional workforce talent pipeline, a lot more older people, leading us to really be thinking about, gee, what's involved in the talent pipeline? Almost to John's point earlier, you know what? All ages are going to have this opportunity to play a role and provide value to society in the short term and in the long term. Now, why did we choose Colorado? When we got involved, we were looking, this was really 2018, late 2018, Colorado's economy was just thriving. We actually had one of the fastest growing aging workforces, about the third fastest in the US, a really diverse industry. And the fact that we have a really broad aging stakeholder network, we had great grassroots support and good receptivity. And the fact that the Next 50 Initiative Foundation is based here in Colorado, we kind of wanted to launch here where they're located. Now, this is a little bit of a busy graph, but I'm going to point you towards these dark shaded states They really outline that dark blue color shows the percentage increase in the 65 plus population between 2003 and 2013. On average, it was 46%, but you can see Colorado's dark blue. I mean, we're very high in terms of that increase in our 65 plus population. Again, that has impacts for all of society, but especially for our workforce. Again, fewer younger people, more older people, how do we really employ and utilize the talent of every age? On the right-hand side, you'll see two numbers, that 13.2% and 18.4%. 13.2% of all Coloradans are currently 65 and over. By the year 2030, that will be 18.4%. And by the year 2050, basically 1 in 4 Coloradans will be over 65. Now, what a lot of focus has really occurred is on that left-hand side of the little circle. A lot of the research, a lot of the effort has been focused on policy that impacts the ability of the employee, you or I, who are looking for a job, to upskill, to reskill, to next skill. Where we decided to focus is how do we connect with employers directly about who's part of your workforce, how are you retaining those older adults, how are you recruiting them? So we're really focused on that relationship with the employer and the existing or past or future employees. In our first year, 2019, we spent a lot of time really just connecting with, more than 1,000 companies, of which we got 147 employers to really complete a pretty in-depth survey. In that survey, we asked them, tell us all about the dynamics of your workforce, all the age ranges, and then share with us, what are those strategies that you're using right now to support older adults or to bring them into the workplace? And then what are those things that you're kind of interested in exploring as you look towards the future? So that picture, that retaining skill, expanding knowledge, securing futures, that's really the summation and the compilation of the first report that we did. And we released that report at a conference in February of 2020. I can put a link in the chat for the website link because it is available on the web as well. Now, whenever I see this slide, I think it goes without saying, what is the value of an older adult? Obviously, they're going to help meet your labor force needs, but when you have people who've been in the workplace in a wide array of different positions, they've got an immense amount of talent, experience, just incredible credibility. And to John's point, I'm very familiar with Chip Conley. And Chip actually really talks about the older adult and what they bring to the table in terms of that emotional quality, the ability to have been working in many different organizations that understand how better to communicate with people, how better to get along with them, and to grow that workforce. So it really does create a more engaged and productive workplace. We hopefully would like to see employers really embrace diversity. But one of the things that we found, and through the research of AARP, in 2016, they actually did a survey of many organizations across the US. And what they found is that age was only included in 8% of the DEI statements. Age was only included in 8% of the DEI statements, which to me is pretty shocking. That means we have a long way to go to really getting people to recognize that, oh, in fact, maybe there is ageism in the workplace, and we need to broaden our lens when we look at DEI. Now, with the advent of COVID, yes, it did in fact create some problems for older adults, certainly as we struggle to figure out how do we minimize contact to avoid the spread of disease. But one thing that really did ultimately work well, I think, for almost every age, was this notion of what seemed very distant, like flex work, flex hours, flex location, suddenly became like the norm. We were flex everything. And shockingly to many employers, to HR departments and employees, it was like, wow, this is actually working a lot better than we thought. Now, HR is struggling to kind of find that right balance and figure out how to kind of right-size the hybrid model. But this fact that it is hybrid is presenting more opportunities for many older adults who maybe don't have the ability to drive, don't want to drive, want to be able to work from the comfort of their home because they're caring for another relative. So when we launched at our conference in February 27th of 2020, that was actually 2 weeks before the state of Colorado shut Colorado down for COVID. Our intent had been to meet with those employers and meet with them one-on-one, go in their offices, spend a lot of time talking about the strategies that they wanted to enhance or improve on to attract and retain those older employees. Well, obviously that got put on the back burner. HR was really focused on just like trying to figure out how to keep the team together and keep the work getting done. So we did take a little bit of a pivot, and we actually pivoted to designing a website that really kind of walks through the why, the value of the older adults, sharing some stories, and then highlighting some employers who've really taken some very specific actions to really connect with and engage that older adult workforce. One of the things that we specifically have been doing is really educating and consulting to employers. We now have more than 30 companies that we're working with specifically, looking at those kinds of strategies that will help them, grow their talent pipeline. It's been important to work with a variety of different partners. So we're working with government offices, workforce centers, aging organizations. Linda, I'm sure it's just like what Bayaud has done, cultivating relationships with all these different organizations. The very first thing that we do is we really direct them to the website. When we have an employer saying, I want to be onboarded, we actually send the website link to them. They go through the website. And this is the little square to the right is an example of like one of the vignettes, the benefits of talent and experience. And then all those little colored boxes are access to additional information. So they have the chance to really look at this very closely and think about it. And then the next step is really having them take the self-assessment tools. So within the website, here are 5 of 10 different key strategies. So is it an age-inclusive culture? Like, what are you doing around health insurance, retirement, workplace wellness, disability, and then, for example, continuing education and training. So these assessments are short, like 4 to 6 questions. It's this opportunity to just kind of go through and give the employer a better sense of, hey, of these 6 questions, I'm actually doing a lot in this category. But in this other category, I really only am doing 1 item. And this may be an area I want the Eames team to really help me explore more, gather some information for me, and I might be able to cultivate or create a new policy or program that would address this issue. So obviously in the last year, our #1 ask has been, talk to me about where I can go to find an older adult and what can I do to retain them, whether they're working here now or like into the future. So, and as we talk about this, tell me more about how much time this takes. So we've kind of color coded. We've used the ski slope analogy since most Coloradans have seen this. Green is easy. It's an easy protocol. Blue is a little bit more difficult. Black is the most difficult. So blue might be something easy, like really modifying a job description, modifying to be a little bit more age friendly. Something that's a little bit more difficult is really taking that flexible position that has truly been modified and flexed a lot in the last 2 years and formalizing that. And a third more difficult one, although we do have some employers doing this, is really looking at the benefit structure and figuring out how do I modify the benefit structure to really enhance the retention of all of my older workforce. So what we do is once a company has selected a policy or strategy, we do the homework, we gather the information, we provide them a lot of different examples. And we might meet every 2 weeks, some once a week, some once a month. It's all a function of the individual company and what their schedule will allow. So the time commitment for an employer, I'm going to say less than 5 hours over a 6-month time period. And that might involve potentially 2 different strategies where we've done the homework, we've met with them, shared with it, and they've actually worked to attempt to actually implement that strategy. The last thing that we do is really look closely at evaluation. So once we've chosen a strategy or 2, we've implemented it, the employers implement it, we come back to you maybe in month 6 and say, you chose those new job descriptions and the new locations to advertise. How did you do? What kind of response did you get? What kind of success did you have? So the whole idea is to really help them assess what worked, maybe how do we tweak it, and how do we move forward. I'm going to give a couple examples of our first generation. And the first one is really a landscaping company. And this was one where we actually worked to help them recruit more older workers. And I know I had a legislator say to me, Karen, I don't want older people going to work for a landscaping company. And I said, well, like, who are you to say where they should work? It's like, if they want to work there, that's their call. Actually, the landscaping company said, 15% of our people are over 60. And quite frankly, they don't have any problem. They work all the way from the nursery to being in the field, heading up, in charge of groups of teams. And he said, the workload is not extraordinarily strenuous, and they really like it. And he says, we specifically want older adults because what we're finding is there's just a higher sense of loyalty and dependability. And he says, we just value that so much, it's just critical to us. So we actually went through their job descriptions with them and really asked them about the language. And they shared, honestly, we haven't changed language probably in 7, 8, 9 years. He says, we just kind of run the same thing. So we helped them modify that language. And then we also offered them some alternative places that when you're looking for older adults, maybe you don't go to Indeed or LinkedIn. Maybe you target it a little bit more closely to places where older people might, frequent. When we followed up with them after about month 5, they actually said on one particular job description, they got additional 6 applicants that were older, of which they did hire one full-time older adult for a position. So that was the kind of feedback we needed to know, hey, that was on course. It did get you more people in the door, and you were actually able to hire another person that was an older adult. Another example is a manufacturing company, and they're in southern Denver. They actually have hydraulic pumps. And the COO is also the HR director, and she attended our first meeting and said, I've looked at the website, but I can tell you right now what I need to work on. My senior engineer, who's been here for 30 years, came in to me just last week and said, I'm retiring. She says, but he at least said to me, I'm retiring, but I'm giving you 2 years to figure out how do we ensure that people here, that this team or whoever we bring in has the knowledge. They're a very small company, 30, 35 people. She says, we don't have lots of dollars. I can't afford to hire 2 people simultaneously for a long period of time. So we proposed a video library where they could document, for example, the common problems with certain pieces of equipment, how best to, the kinds of things to do to correct those problems. And then as they started talking further, as we continue meeting, they said, this engineer knows every client we have. He's worked with them. And so we're actually now going to try to document a little bit more about what the relationship entails and how best to work with these organizations. The last example I'm going to provide is of a social service organization. And one of the first things that we do once we've had them look at the website is, would you please share your DEI statement? They did share their DEI statement, and they said, we pointed out you don't have age in the DEI statement. And that's sort of like one of the first steps. They modified that language. And she said, I can honestly say I haven't looked at the DEI statement for a decade. Thought it was always in there, and great that we've modified it. But she actually wanted to broaden her work to specifically have education done in the workplace, helping the employees of their company understand what is ageism in the workplace. I had a conversation with one HR director of a very large organization here in Denver, more than 10,000 employees, 42 HR people. And she said, I have young people working for me. And she says, they don't think they're ageist in any way, shape, or form. I'm 67. I can see where they are. She says, none of it's intentional. This is not an intentional kind of issue. They just need a little education to better understand how some of the things, actions, words they're saying are in fact ageist. So this particular organization wanted, again, that kind of education to help their employees and the managers better understand. So that's kind of a quick overview of the age inclusive management strategies. I'd be glad to put my email in the chat, or Linda knows how to get hold of me. I would mention that we are having a conference on September 28th, talking all about the older adult workplace. Actually, Chip Conley will be working with us in virtual to share a little bit of his wisdom about his experience at Airbnb. And you can actually go to that website, transamericainstitute.org/AIMS, to sign up for the conference. It is free. So Linda, that is what I was going to share. I will turn it over to whoever you would like to have next.
Can you make sure you share that link for that conference? Because I'd certainly like to take a peek
Yes,
at that.
I'll stick it in the chat box. And again, it's virtual or in person. I mean, so if somebody can't attend the whole thing, you know, you can, and we will have it recorded and on a website as well.
Terrific.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Karen. That was great information. I think there were some things that are really important to think about, like the landscaping company that was talking about 15% of their workforce is over 60. And we have this idea that people who are over 50 or 60 can't do physical work. And I know people who are over 50 and 60, I see you shaking your head, Carol, over 50 and 60 that can outwork somebody in their 20s. Yeah, you've seen that too, huh, Carol? Right. So it's important for us to think about individuals as individuals and finding people's strengths as we go and not assuming whether it's because of a disability or age or whatever, that somebody can do a certain
Bayaud
thing.
Enterprises, there are some cucumbers in the food pantry area on the table. Grab them if you would like.
Okay, I've got to go. I've got some cucumbers to get. Sorry. Anyway. So now I think let's have Patricia go and talk about the EEOC, and then we'll kind of talk a little bit about what Voc Rehab can do. But be thinking about questions that you have. So I'll have Patricia go, and then Chris, and then I'll talk a little bit about Voc Rehab. So take it away, Patricia.
Okay, so let me, I'm going to start with age discrimination, and then I'll segue into disability discrimination, because I'll connect the two. So EEOC, we are the law enforcement agency for employment rights, and we cover several laws in employment. So I'm going to concentrate on two. One is the Age Discrimination and Employment Act. And the Age Discrimination and Employment Act protects people who are over the age of 40. It does, some state, like the Colorado state law, you know, because each state has civil rights agencies, and so you have state laws, and so people will say, well, my state, you know, that's not true. In my state, the law protects me, you know, even though I'm not 40. And it's like, well, that may be your state law, but federal law protects you over the age of 40, and that's across the board. So every state in America, you are prohibited from discriminating against any worker who is over the age of 40. So that is just with a hard stop on it. So discrimination can occur when the victim or the person who is discriminated over the age of 40. And so what does that look like? Well, oh, I'm sorry. The law prohibits discrimination in any aspect of employment. And so that's hiring, firing, pay, job assignments, promotions, layoffs, training, benefits, or any other term or condition of employment. And so it also is unlawful to harass a person because of their age. And so when we talk about harassment, we mean offensive or derogatory remarks about a person's age. And I want to put a side note that the law doesn't prohibit sinful teasing or offhanded comments or isolated incidents that isn't considered serious. The Supreme Court actually said the law isn't a civility code, right? It's not there to govern petty slights or things that offend us. So things that aren't serious aren't covered. So harassment is illegal when it's so frequent or severe that it creates a hostile or offensive work environment, or when the results are so much that the person is genuinely harmed, such as they're fired or they're demoted. And we can talk about that in a conversation later. I just want to give you like the brief overview because I know sometimes you give too much information, you get information overload. So when we talk about harassment, and this, by the way, harassment applies when I go and talking about disability. So the harassment can be the victim's supervisor, a supervisor in another area, a coworker, or someone who is not even an employee, such as a client or a customer. So that's like the broad brush stroke of age discrimination. When we talk about disability in employment, disability discrimination occurs when the employer or other entity covered by Title I of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which we call the ADA, which, by the way, that protects private and state and local employees, or the Rehab Act, and that we're not going to talk about because that's federal employees. That treats a qualified employee or applicant unfavorably because of their disability. And disability laws prohibit discrimination when it comes to any aspect of employment. And that, again, we're going to talk about hiring, firing, pay, job assignments, promotions, layoffs, fringe benefits, or really any other term or condition of employment. And really, disability, we have a lot of people, like, they don't understand the definition of disability. So the ADA, the American Disabilities Act, directs that the definition of a disability is construed broadly in favor of extensive coverage to the maximum extent permitted by law. But that being said, not everyone with a medical condition is protected from disability discrimination. So under the law, there are 3 areas that somebody is protected with under a disability. So that is 1. And so 1, the person has an actual physical or mental condition that substantially limits a major life activity. And that's like walking, talking, seeing, hearing, learning, or operation of a major bodily function, such as a brain, musculoskeletal, respiratory, circular, or some other function. So that's 1. Or they have a history of a disability, and that's, I've had cancer, so that's my history of a disability. Or 3, they've been the subject of an adverse employment action because of a physical or mental impairment the individual is perceived as having. Someone perceives that I have a disability that I don't really have, such as they perceive that I have bipolar, or I have a mental disorder. Except that that let's say my impairment is transitory, like it lasts less than 6 months, or it's minor. But that being said, for anything to be covered under the ADA, the medical condition does not have to be long-term or permanent or severely limiting. If the symptoms come or go, it doesn't matter as long as they are active. So that's, and again, I want us to have a conversation about this, because disability kind of gets into gray areas. There are always exceptions. The big deal with the ADA, which we want people to talk about, is it's reasonable accommodation. So when a job, and by the way, this is where we come into with the landscapers, because when you get into like older workers, a lot of times it's not really the age that people are concerned with. What they're more concerned with is that, do we have to accommodate them? They're older, so what if they get sick, or what if they get injured, and things like that. So this is where, like, sometimes age and the ADA go hand in hand. So when job applicants or employees request job modifications, the disability laws require that employers in private, federal, state, and local government sectors provide a reasonable accommodation. And a reasonable accommodation is kind of a catch-all word that basically means just change the way things are usually done to the employees and job applicants who have the impairment that substantially limits a major life activity, unless doing so would cause an undue hardship for the employer. And a reasonable accommodation is there so they can help the person with the disability apply for a job, perform the major duties or enjoy the benefits and privileges of employment. I'm going to give you an example of what a reasonable accommodation is. That would be a ramp for a wheelchair. There you go. So if you have a building where you have stairs and you have no ramp, an example of why you would need an accommodation is that, you know, a person with a wheelchair is automatically barred from applying if you say, well, you have to have in-person, you know, we only accept applications in person. Well, you have stairs, so people with wheelchairs automatically can't apply. So you need a ramp there. And even if they applied and they got the job, how do they get into the building? So these are things that you have to consider. These are simple accommodations. And so this is what we have. The same thing, unless, you know, one step further, you have an employee that's in a wheelchair and you decide to have an offsite retreat at a place where it's a team building, but the place doesn't have anything accessible for somebody in a wheelchair. They can't participate, so you automatically exclude them. So this is where we talk about why we want to have the conversations. So it's just giving them the same access that you give other people. So I'm going to stop it there. That's what the ADA is. That's what the ADEA is. And the reason why we want to put those together is that as we age, those two tend to merge together. And we just ask employers, let's have the conversation so that we can have an accessible and inclusive work environment. And by the way, as we're hitting that brain drain and seeing those employees leave, this is a conversation that is necessary to retain our employees. So this is a win-win for everybody. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Linda. I don't know where you are on the screen here, because on mine you're right here, but you may be here.
We've moved.
Yeah, you moved.
Yeah, that brought up a few questions for me that I'm going to ask before we move on. One of the things that it asks on the work opportunity tax credit is it asks if you have a history of a disability like cancer. So if you have a history of disability, but it's not affecting you now, how come that falls into the same category?
Okay, so the history of a disability, this goes to misbias and stereotypes, right? So it doesn't, the way it can affect me now, an example I like to use is the benevolent benefactor employer. So for example, you have an employer and I've been through a bout of cancer and I am fine, I'm Ned, everything's fine, right? And a promotion comes up, and I'm not quite at my 5 years, right? And I apply for the promotion, and as they're on the search committee, somebody brings up, well, you know, Patty's a great candidate, but she did have that bout with cancer, and can we all just have a moment here? Do we think that she's healthy enough right now to take on these challenges? Because, we know that was a really rough time for her. And we have to really consider that this is a lot of stress with this new job, and we don't want her getting sicker. And, we have to really consider this when making these decisions, because this job is going to require a lot more stress and a lot more, and you can see them going down that path. And it's not that they're trying to exclude me. They're actually thinking they're doing the right thing by me, but it's the benevolent benefactor, right? Same thing happens with people who've had heart disease and heart attacks and major health crises. It's that record of that disability where they look at it and they say, ooh, we kind of just want to pump the brakes on this. We don't think this might be the right fit for this person at this time. And it's like, no, you can't use their records against them. And then we have the medical considerations, because like, well, if they get sick again, it's going to jack up everybody's health insurances and things like that. So those histories of health, especially, major health crises, cannot be considered in any employment decisions.
Okay, interesting. Also, I have a couple of people right now that are they use power chairs, power wheelchairs. And part of their job description is going into people's homes or traveling a few times a day, which is very challenging. So figuring out how they can do that, is that a reasonable accommodation or not?
That falls under the, it depends. So that is it depends. Going into people's private homes would be a different conversation than going into facilities, which are under law, they have to be accessible. Whereas like if they're going into people's homes because they're caregivers for those people, and those people are employee, you're providing those people a service. That's a different conversation, because my home, if I am sick and you are providing me a service because I'm sick, I do not have to provide an accommodation for my caregiver, because I'm the person being cared for. So the response is that asking me to make my home accessible for my caregiver is an undue burden on me, because I'm actually the one who's sick. So there's no way I can do that. However, your responsibility as an employer is everything that the law says for your employee to make things accessible for your employee. So for if you're providing your employee vans to drive to and from, those vans must meet standards. If you're going to and from buildings, those buildings must meet standards. If you're going in and out of hospital and care facilities, those hospital and care facilities must meet standards. So your employee cannot be limited in their ability to perform their job duties more like any other employee can.
Okay. One of the thing about the pandemic that Karen brought up was the so much more remote work. And that has been great for people who are older and people with disabilities, because Carol and Tammy have taken some people who really have to work from home because of pain issues or, hearing or whatever. And it has really been good to have them have a place where they can work and be successful. Does anyone have any questions for Patricia before we move on? I should have asked that about Karen too.
I
Anyway.
had one quick question for Patricia. So as people get older, I always hear about employers saying how their insurance costs are going to go up and like not hiring it. Is that discrimination?
Yeah, so it depends. We do get that in there. I have to be honest with you, that one I'm not a good one to ask. Our Office of Legal Counsel can answer that one better. When I was an investigator, that would come up, and we would find sometimes we would find reasonable cause on those cases, and sometimes we wouldn't. But there are actually a lot of factors that have to be attached to that. But I'll give you a short answer on that. If they're using that to get rid of the older workers, because sometimes they will, companies will go for insurances and things like that, because it's the easiest way to weed out an older workforce. So when given options between equally comparable insurance companies, and there's really no difference between the two, but one will help me get rid of my older workforce, and the other one won't. And I go with the one who will get rid of the older workforce. The one that will help me get rid of the older workforce is illegal. You can't do that. You can't use something as an avenue to discriminate against another group, because I want to get rid of that group, so I'm going to use another avenue to do it. So it doesn't look like that's my motive when it really is my motive.
Okay, awesome. So Chris, why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your experience at Bayaud?
Sure. Well, my name's Chris O'Connor. I'm the Director of Federal Contracts here at Bayaud. I've been with Bayaud for 17 years now, and I am one of those older workers. And so I think it's just important to reiterate, some of the points that were already made, that, older workers can bring a lot of things to the table. They bring a lot of loyalty, dependability, experience. They have lifetime of experience they can draw on, a certain level of maturity that goes with age, skills, both hard and soft skills. I think oftentimes older workers, in our environment especially, can be seen as role models and to help to mentor younger folks who are kind of coming up through the ranks. So I think those things are really important to highlight. Doing what we do at Bayaud, I think through our mission to support folks with barriers and hurdles to employment. I think we're somewhat of an outlier. I know that we're trying to get society to come along with the mindset that a lot of us have, and I think we're making slow gains, but we're not there as quick as all of us would like to be. And I guess what we do in our environment is, and we manage 13 federal contracts in the Denver greater area. And these are Ability One contracts, and some folks may be familiar with Ability One, but it's a federal employment program to support individuals with significant disabilities, many of which are older folks as well. And I think it's important, obviously, to believe in the potential of all workers. It's important to believe in the potential of human beings, and I think that's what we're trying to, over time, get the rest of the business owners and the rest of society to understand that everybody brings something to the table. All of us have barriers. All of us have strengths. So I think what we do in our environment is we try to meet people where they're at, and we don't really focus on age, disability. It's like, where are you at? What do you want to do? What can you do? And how can we help you get there? I think it's that belief. And we have a number of folks throughout our agency that work specifically on our contracts that have been with Bayaud for longer than I have. A number of folks that have been around for 20, 25 years in that environment. We provide a lot of support for individuals, whether it be age-related or disability-related, and providing those reasonable accommodations. And I think that's really one of the key things is meeting people where they're at. And I think the secret of individuals who are successful in this environment just understand that everybody has value. And really the best way to get a dedicated workforce is to believe in your workforce. So I think we provide a lot of accommodations for folks, and we provide a lot of training support, maybe second, third chances for folks, because we understand that everybody learns at a different pace. Everybody's coming from a different perspective. And I think that's what is at least a part of what allows us to be successful in this environment and have a number of folks that have been around for as long as they have, at least, that have worked for Bayaud. And I think that's really honestly, one of the unique things about Bayaud is it's really kind of a community, and we're all really in this together. And we can't have one without the other, and you can't have management without workers, and you can't have workers without management, and it all works together. So I think that's really key to all this. Like I said, we have a number of Ability One contracts throughout the Denver area. And I think, like I said, that reasonable accommodation, whether it be for disability or age-related challenges, is providing that support. And again, meeting people where they're at and helping folks get to where they want to be. And maybe the job you're in now is maybe not the job you want forever, but what can we do to help you move to that next step is really kind of how we kind of see things. And so we have a number of folks that have been around for a long time and have moved into lateral positions or even management positions from where they started. And they started as mail clerks, and now they're running the entire contract, so it's really neat to see. But I really think it comes down to, having that flexibility and understanding with folks. And those accommodations that we provide for folks can be a variety of things. as Patricia was talking about. And sometimes maybe they go even beyond reasonable accommodations, but we provide, it may be specialized training. Maybe someone doesn't get it the first time. Maybe they need training every couple of months to be refreshed. Maybe they need modeling. Maybe they need things in pictorial form or those kinds of things. So maybe they need a flexible schedule to attend appointments or those types of things. Maybe they can't do this piece of the job. So we'll often do job carving, and maybe this person does this part and this person does the other part, and people work as a team that way to make sure that the duties get done. I really think, and a lot of people often ask, well, doesn't that create a lot of extra work, and aren't you spinning your wheels sometimes? Doesn't it cost you extra money and effort? And yeah, it does a little bit, but you know what you get in the long run, and the payoff and the benefit for that outweighs, the financial or time constraints that you may be worried about, is that, you have a dedicated workforce that believes in the mission, believes in what you're doing, and believes that they're part of something bigger. I really think that's, kind of key to what we do. So we have over 100 individuals in our environment. Many of which, we have 130 folks in our federal contracts. We have 13 of them throughout the Denver area. And over 100, I guess just under 100 of those are either individuals with disabilities or older folks. I think another important piece to this is providing those benefits to employees as well, to meet them, where they're at and what needs they have. So, we provide, like I said, a lot of accommodations, flexibility, career development. We ask, what do you want to do? Maybe today's your job for right now, but if you want to be a manager, let's talk about how to develop those skills, and let's provide some training, whether it be on-site training or mentorship or formalized training through institutions or educational environments. We also provide a number of benefits for folks through our resource navigation department to provide those wraparound services for folks too. Maybe some of those barriers may be that I don't have housing, or I don't have childcare, or there are those types of things too, which if you dig a little bit under the surface, often you'll find that those are the underlying issues which prevent people from continuing to be viable on the workforce. But I guess that's just a snippet of what we do. I hope that's what you're looking for, but I'm happy to take any questions you have. And I just wanted to take a few moments to explain what we do, and I appreciate your time.
And one of the things I know we do too is this is a place where it's okay to say you have a disability, because we'll run into people and we'll ask them, do you have any disabilities? And they'll be like, no, I'm, and you're like, well, really, whatever. And when we dig a little bit more, we figure out, oh, they have a mental health issue or something. And this is a place where it's safe to say that, so we can figure out their accommodations. And it's sad that more employers aren't that way. With most employers, if you say, I have a mental health diagnosis or whatever, they're going to be like, well, forget it, I'm going with the next person. And they don't even give that person a chance to figure out how can they be successful at work. And I think that's really a shame. But I like go ahead, Patricia.
I actually want to talk to that, because there are a lot of myths that surround people with when to disclose your disability in employment. And so I would really like to address some of those, because if you have a disability, you don't ever have to tell your employer. So we're gonna start with that, is that if you have a disability, it's nobody's business. So no one ever has to know, because people say, well, when do I tell my employer I have a disability? The answer is never. You never have to tell anybody you have a disability. The only time you ever have to disclose your disability, I mean, other than like insurance, I mean, but even that, you have to, that's between you and your doctor. But the only time you ever have to disclose that you have a disability is if you are requesting an accommodation. That is the only time a disability comes up. And so if I can do my job without an accommodation, I don't ever have to tell my employer I have a disability. When you request an accommodation, that's when your disability becomes an issue. And at that point, the only medical information you have to provide is medical information associated with your disability. And so, for example, if I have a mental health issue, let's say I have a bunch of mental health issues, like they stack on top of each other, which in a lot of cases, mental health issues are not isolated. They may come in clusters. But let's say that it is because of there is one that associates with a certain job issue, not the rest of them, just one. And that is the one that is impeding my ability to do a certain job, a certain portion of the job. I can do everything else, but it's this one thing that stops me from doing this job. That is the only one I need to disclose to my employer, and that is the only one that we need to work with on an accommodation. They don't need to know all the rest of it. And that is the one that we go and we work with my provider or my physician or my mental health provider, and we work on an accommodation with that. They don't have to know all of my other issues. And this is where we need to be clear on this, because sometimes people think that they need to know my entire diagnosis or all of my other issues. They don't. It's very specific. It is not a fishing expedition with the ADA. It is only there to accommodate you, to provide you, you provide the information so that they can help you get the accommodation, and that everybody works together on a win-win. It is not there so that people get information about you. Long answer, I know.
And that's one of the things really that's nice about Bayaud is because we have to have like 75% of the people we hire have to have disabilities to work in these sites. So it's really a relief for a lot of people to be able to say, this is all of who I am. And I can work in a place that accepts all of who I am, even though they didn't have to disclose it. Disclosing it allows them to say too, I'm really having an issue today with whatever. I need an extra break or something.
Yeah, and I'm not saying don't do it. I mean, that's actually a
Don't
relief when everybody
normally
can, when people can be themselves without any fear of any type of ramifications to
Right.
being your genuine and authentic self. That's a great thing. But
Yep.
there are people that have mis stereotypes about who your authentic self is. And so the law says, the employer is not allowed to try to find that,
Right. Right. And hold it against you. They're not allowed to,
and use devious tactics to get you to disclose it.
yeah. Any other questions real quick? Go ahead, Carrie.
I had just one comment. So Chris, you talk about how some of the people that are actually employed by Bayaud and that you're sending out on these contracts, that it may require every couple of months, kind of refreshing, or, depending on the individual, they may need more education. And as I follow technology, and there was a startup that just made a pitch called Quick Hire, and they work specifically in retail, hospitality, and restaurant industry. And they said their turnover right now is 1 month and 26 days. That's how long the average person stays. And, I'm an employer, traditionally I might have thought, well, I can't invest the time to engage with somebody who might be connected with Bayaud, who may have I'd have to spend extra time with. It's like, think about it. If every 1.5 months you have to retrain somebody because they're leaving, would it not be better to invest?
Right.
Like knowing that every 2 months I'm investing a half a day in this person, but I keep them on my payroll. They continue, they slowly grow and become a valued employee. So sometimes I think employers they're crazy.
Say that statistic again. So the average.
This is with a company called Quick Hire, and they actually have a fair number of large employers they're working with, but for their retail, hospitality, and restaurant industry, the average length of time that a new hire is on is 1 month and 26 days. So every month and 26 days, they are looking all over again. I mean, that is unbelievable. the turnover costs them so much money. That
Oh,
if you
yeah.
can find somebody who I can mold or work with or help fit into this position, that's got to be infinitely better. I just share that because to me, I was shocked to hear that number.
And that's one of the things that research has shown too, is that us older workers and people with disabilities are typically a lot more loyal to the company and will stay around a lot longer.
Especially
That's
when you're willing to invest some time and trust and belief in that, right? That's what carries you through in the long run, is to build those relationships.
yeah.
And like you said, I think that's, if you're weighing that on a cost benefit analysis, you'll find that that's well worth your time.
Yeah. Yeah, I love how you said that to focus on the potential of all workers, Chris. I think that's really key to all of this.
Absolutely.
Employers did that more often, that, everybody has their gifts and abilities for sure. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about Voc Rehab, what Voc Rehab can do. And Voc Rehab is a state agency in every state, and it helps individuals with any type of disability to get back into the workforce. So it might help them by hiring somebody like Bayaud, somebody like myself, to help that person find a job. When you have somebody like myself, a job developer, helping somebody find work, they can think about the skills that the person has and where they might be a good fit company-wise or whatever. They can help the person see what their abilities are, help them with the resume. Then Voc Rehab can also do things like assessments to see where they're called Voc evals, where they look at a person and they do different tests to see where the person's skills are, where their weaknesses are. They can do things called work adjustments, where if you have somebody who hasn't worked in a while or never worked, maybe a young person who's never worked, somebody who hasn't worked since they have a disability, maybe they have a brain injury and they haven't worked since their brain injury, they can work in a place through work adjustment where Voc Rehab pays the company like Bayaud, and then Bayaud pays the person with the disability to work somewhere for about 7 or 8 hours a week. And then they get some experience. What is it like to work? They can figure out accommodations, how to ask for accommodations, how to talk about that. And then they also have something to put on their resume. So Carol, I don't know if you or Tammy want to say anything, because you guys have had 4, yeah, 3, something like that. People doing work adjustment for you. So if either of you want to say a little something about what it's been like and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's so funny because like Tammy and I, our very first employee that we ever had with Totally Interior they were over 60 and killed it on construction sites. And the work that we do is extremely physically demanding. It's not like when you're talking about the landscaping company, I'm like, it's interesting in that sense. And that was not through Bayaud. That was just like, we just got really lucky in the sense of we already had that experience of knowing that, there is exceptional elements to hiring individuals who, tend to be older, but they're, again, yeah, exactly what I've been hearing, and just can reiterate very much that like they're very loyal, and they are consistent and reliable. Like, I'm always like, please be older than 50. Please be. And then in terms of our experience with Voc Rehab, it's been really great with our admin staff. And because we are a startup, I realized like in our experience with working with the people that we've been so honored to have, like incredible. Like I was literally crying to one of them today about how grateful I am for all the work that she does for us, because it's just the past few weeks have been really difficult, and I have found that my own disabilities are getting in the way of me being able to do my work, and she's shining. So I'm like, thank you. Jeez Louise. But yeah, and seeing them flourish, like we keep hearing a lot of that the flexibility that a startup actually provides is really unique, because I I know in the beginning of hiring them, in that process of starting the, like, is this going to be a good fit or not? So much of what they're worried about is, am I able to meet the expectations? And what's great about it is, like, me and Tammy alone have been running this thing by ourselves. And so there are things that are just not getting done because we don't have the capacity. And so when you are trying to find spaces for individuals with voc rehab, like, startups are actually a really cool space, because the the element of all the work that we are doing is just overwhelming all the time. So I just say, I'm like, honestly, the fact that you are here is like a bonus, like absolute bonus. The fact that you can take on invoicing or help me with payroll or whatever, it's magic. And even if you can't, or you can't show up, the reality is Tammy and I have been doing this for so long that it's just the two of us that we can do it. And there's no stress of if for whatever reason you're not at the capacity that you're used to being at or whatever. Like, it's been a really magical very symbiotic reciprocal experience for us. Tam, would you like to add?
You're muted.
Yeah, it has been really good. I mean, they've really taught us a lot as well. And I think that's been really nice to understand exactly like where they're coming from. Then we're coming from the same kind of experiences because we have our disabilities as well. So just to understand that everybody has something to bring to the table, find out what their strengths are, and make sure that we focus on those strengths. Because I think with anybody, as far as any individual you deal with, if we're focusing on their strengths and they feel like they're actually completing something at the end of the day and doing something positive that they're good at, you're going to see positive reinforcement and positive flow from that, as far as work wise and as building a relationship wise. So it's been a great learning experience for us too, just learning where people are good and where people struggle, and how to make those needs met.
And another thing you guys have done really well is been a safe space for somebody to say, I'm really struggling today with my anxiety or whatever the case may be, and having a place where they can practice saying, I'm really having a tough time right now. I really need to take an hour off, or whatever the case may be, where they're not going to be judged and that kind of thing. So that's another thing that I would love to see more employers do, because they're going to have a lot more success. And honestly, even people without disabilities, there's times when life's just too much. I've just got too much going on right now. I need a little mental health break, or, whatever the case may be. So
Actually, Linda, can I add to that?
yes, absolutely.
I wanted to.
Yeah, because Tam and I, our business is specifically focused around working with individuals who are coming out of incarceration and have a lot of barriers to employment from the get. And so, and we work with a lot. It's not just that workforce population. There's other individual workforce populations that we've identified that are not being represented in construction. And so with that, we really built, our business model was actually around a specific workforce population. So we built it around the barriers, versus we built a business model and expected our employees to fit the model. We built the model for them specifically. So in that sense, it's a little different. And it is kind of like, again, like that piece of, if you all are looking for more spaces, especially to reach out and get through, I think that's where reaching to startups is actually, because once you have these things in place, I've found like it's really hard a little bit to kind of do that uphill battle of like, Karen, the work that you've been doing is incredible, but I'm sure it's also like you're trying to fit within these already existing structures that probably have already been made to not include people. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely overcoming the barriers are huge, and changing people's mindsets, I think, is one of the biggest things. But in order for today's day and age, I feel there is solutions to the workforce shortage, to the workforce thing that's going on. Treat your employees right, find their benefits, show them what they're strong at, and help them to feel good about what they're doing and growing. You keep putting them in a spot where they're not doing well, and they're not feeling good about themselves, they're of course going to hate it. They're going to not stick around because there's 20 jobs down the street. It's finding the way to be like that different driving force to keep employees, to make people grow, to show them that there's, ways to actually make it and build a life. And we're missing that in a lot of different, and that's why people jump from job to job, because people are numbers. They're not looking at them as individuals, where I think that's where we had a really good success rate with our people, because we had like 82% success rate until the summer, and it went down to like 70 something, but still it was really amazing how many people actually stuck with us, and in a high risk population. But it just goes to show, like, offering social services, offering just a little bit of care, and like we would just call our employees on once a week, whatever, how are you guys doing, is there anything we can do for you guys, and things like that. So I just think that that's what's missing in the workforce, and hopefully we can change people, because they would tell us like, how do you guys find employees? Well, they kind of come find us because after a while, it's just the word of mouth. So I just think that incorporating those things in today's day and age is going to be huge.
Another thing that's, oh, go ahead, Karen.
I was going to say, actually, that's one thing that I've noticed too, Tammy. It's interesting because we've reached out to lots of different employers to talk with them, but it does seem that there is the people who join us, there's a certain mentality or a certain mindset that is just broader in general, that they are looking more holistically, more comprehensively. Some either, they're young leaders or older leaders that are really thinking about, like I plan to work a really long time, or I'm getting ready to retire. I mean, so it's a whole different mindset than sort of like, I want to say, I don't say the traditional corporation, but it does seem that the ones that work with it, there's a different thought process. Mm-hmm.
One of the things that is interesting that's happening right now too, that I've seen as I help people apply for jobs, is the job application process is beginning to really change. Like, they're not always asking these days, like, all about their education, their work history and all that stuff. They're asking more, doing like a skills assessment, which that to me makes way more sense. These are the skills that we need for this job. Can you do these skills? Doesn't matter if you're 20 or 60. Can you do what it's asking you to do? Which I think is a good thing to see. Patricia, I see your hand up. How lovely. Isn't that very technologically savvy of you?
Well, no, actually, I had a question for Carol and Tammy, because I was literally having this conversation earlier today with a stakeholder about the ADA and how the businesses have built have been built around the privilege of non-disabled people. And that when you said, well, we've built our business model around our clients, around a very specific group, that struck me. And I kind of wanted to know, when you said you built your business model around your employees, how did you do that? I mean, what did you do to take the barriers away from them? How are you looking at that? Because I find that just interesting as heck.
Well, what we did is, before we got started, Carol kind of got thrown together. My history is that years ago, I did time in prison, and when I came out, I had some support, but it was very, very, very difficult. And so, wanted to see how, and I see what the barriers were. It wasn't that I couldn't work. It wasn't that, it was that you had to go to this meeting, and you had to go to UAs, and you had to do this, and you had to do that, and you had so many things spread out that you lose it by the time you're supposed to get a job or supposed to work, or you have to leave the employer, but you have to go, and employers don't understand that, also, you have housing barriers, transportation barriers, which are the two biggest things, food barriers, because if they can't come to work and have food and eat properly, they can't keep their head right, they can't work good. I mean, all those things all fall into play. So what we did is I went out there, started networking and working with a lot of other nonprofits to provide the necessary things that we needed for these employees. So we're able to provide housing assistance. We have landlords who will work with employees who have backgrounds, even though they do have backgrounds, they don't hold it against them, and they have a nice place that they can rent. We also have, we get help with gas cards, bus passes, boots, work items, things like that. So we've just really built, a really good team together with all the nonprofits that are going out. We have also established our own nonprofit now so that we can obtain the grants to provide these for our employees as well. So we both do like a social work side as well as an employment side. So, they come in, and if they need to talk, I have a master's of social work, they come in, we talk, we sit down, and we find out what their barriers are. We find out what we need to get through, so like I said, it builds up to that loyalty. We've had such a success as far as people growing, and we have people in supervisor positions now. We have people, that are really doing well and moving up in the ranks. So, I mean, it's proven that it's working, because they are sticking around. And so by sticking around, they grow, right? When you stay in a job for a while, you tend to grow. So we're seeing them grow, and we're seeing them, do different things and really accomplish things that they didn't think they could, from the guy who came in and had his head down because he had been homeless for 6 years and just didn't feel good about himself, to now the guy who goes to work every single day, has a good job, and is doing well, So there, and is now in housing. So, and maintaining housing too. So that's the big thing, is maintaining it as well. So, I really think we're onto something by providing supportive services along as well. And I think it's something that other, agencies, not just people who are focusing on like people that are have barriers to employment, but we all have barriers, right? Every single one of us out there right now, with mental health, with stress, with everything that's going on. I just really think if that would be a way to combat your employee shortage, because they really stick around because that, bus pass helps them get to work, that
I think you're brilliant. I think you're brilliant. I think your model is brilliant. I think you're brilliant. I think this is groundbreaking.
Thank you guys. We're trying. It's been a up and down experience, but we're learning along the way,
Yeah.
So now we're looking at venturing into other avenues, because we find that, construction is great. The reason we went into construction, it kind of fell into our lap. Plus, there was a lot of jobs in construction, and this is where they can actually make money to survive here in Denver. Because let's be honest, if you're not making $25, $30 an hour in Denver, you can't survive, right? Where can we put people who have barriers to employment where they can actually make a living and build a career, not just a band-aid job? We want to see them in 2 years still working there, still, maintaining housing, still maintaining, what they need to maintain, in the areas they're in. So we're looking into other avenues. We are getting ready to start 2 OJTC programs. One is going to be with Rack Pros and Kinesco, and they'll be doing all the racking systems for like all the new warehouses that are opening. And with the change in like Amazon and all the online ordering, warehouses are popping up huge all over the place. So they would go in and do all the rack systems for these organizations, and they're going to do on-job training, and then they have the ability after 6 weeks to be hired on with the company, which is, they pay very well, and it's a very good career. They can do welding, they can do setup, they can do where they put it all together, where I actually, cut the metal and, do all that inside the warehouse. So there's like different areas for all of them. They can run the forklift, they can, run a wrench. It just depends on, where they're going to be good at. But it's not so mentally demanding as the construction world. And it's physically demanding, but not as much, so we think that that's going to be a good first for like our older people and for anybody really, because it's not so demanding. The other side, we are going to be working with, right now we're building this with Olive Art, and if they are an apartment, they have a bunch of different complexes here in Denver and also Summit Springs. And so we're going to do a couple of different facets with them. One is the maintenance on the job training. So there's just like in construction, there's a huge shortage of maintenance people in complexes. So you go to complexes, you see how bad they look. That used to look really nice. Well, it's not that they're don't want to maintain it, it's they can't find the workers to maintain.
Yeah.
They can't find the workers to, and do all the fixes that need to be done. But again, it's a good paying job, right? Not just that, not only do they pay good, it can help our housing situation because most of the times they offer discount housing in their complexes. So not only are we giving them a good job, we're also breaking down the housing situation, correct? So instead of them living in a hotel because nobody will rent to them, they have the opportunity after the 6 weeks to get hired on and have their own place on top of the job. So it covers both sides, and it's wonderful because it's a career. Somebody's always going to need their apartment fixed, or painting done or anything like that. And then the other side is inspections and marketing, because as beginning of the year, or actually in March, the law passed that every landlord now will have to provide inspections on their properties before people move in. With COVID and all the housing assistance that was given, they found that many of the properties that people were living in were uninhabitable.
Horrible.
So with this all coming out and all this coming into play, they have now required every single landlord to provide that HMIS, that inspection, which is the same inspection that they do for Section 8 housing. So what's great about it is that we're putting that together now. We'll be doing all the inspections for Olive Bark as well. So what's good with that program, it works really well with our single moms, our single dads, because they only have to go out in the field 2 or 3 hours. All the rest of the work is done at home. So they can go out in the field, do these inspections, go home, put all the inspections in the computer, send them to me, and I get them out to the agencies, but they're able to make a full-time income and still be mom and dad and pick them up from school and take them to school at the end of the day. So that helps people who are stuck in that situation. So we're looking at, we really want to expand into different areas so that we can, work with everybody, people with disabilities. I'm disabled. I've been sick for a very long time. I've been on insulin since I was 3 years old. So, and, have had other factors as well. So I get the barrier part, and we want to just be able to be there for anybody who has some kind of barrier, but not, like I said, not a Band-Aid. Let's get them real careers, real jobs, real lives. Because it's been so wonderful seeing these guys live in their car, to get their own place, to get their child back, to pay their child support, and to stay in their place and to do well, which is something they never thought they could do because they were just never given that guidance, and a lot of it is generational. So they never had parents who showed them that, you know what I mean? So they don't even know how to open a bank account, so we've set up, like with our bank, they come out once a month and give them classes on, on your credit, on how to have a checking account, how to, maintain it, how to save, things like that, things that they just don't know how to do.
Right.
So it helps them grow in every aspect,
So Chris, that's one of Bayod's strengths too, is we were kind of built around, having people with disabilities. Did you want to say something about that?
No, I think everything you're saying is striking, home in a big way. And I think I just want to say, you guys are doing amazing work, and that's incredible to hear. And I think you're right. I mean, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about dignity in people, believing in people, and having that belief in someone who never had someone believe, like, hey man, you can do this. You know what? We got you. You can do this. What can you do? We're going to help you do it, and we're going to make sure you get it done. And we're going to be there to support you along the way. That goes so far. That takes people to places where you never thought they could go, and they never thought they could go. So just to hear you say that mirrors a lot of the perspective that we have and what we do as well. And I think that's the secret sauce. And then, like you said, Tammy, I think It's a perspective that we need to get out to the rest of the business world, because it's not magic. It's basic respect, dignity, and belief in human beings. And that's what it is. No
It's
matter
that
who you
easy.
are,
It
where you
really
come
is
from.
just that. I mean, I have an employee now, like every time we talk to him, he's like, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe he is now the superintendent, labor superintendent on the job site. Went from when he started with us $15 an hour, he's making $33 an hour, and he works for the company itself now. So, I mean, that's just that kind. And every time I see him, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Because all he needed was that little belief, you know what I mean? Where nobody did believe in it,
And helping people figure out what job is right for them, and not just sticking
That's the biggest
people
thing.
in whatever job. And our Source America sites, they pay federal wages, so they all pay really good wages too, which is also really important. But that's another thing Voc Rehab can help with too, is helping figure out through their assessments and that kind of thing, what is the right job for somebody, and having them work with somebody with experience in that. So,
And
all right, well, we're at
can
like
I
2
add
minutes.
one
Yes,
small
go
thing
ahead.
to that? Because
Well,
I really appreciated like that whole ocean like piece of like the skill set piece, but even again, like another nuanced thing that like one that me and Tammy really learned, and like I've been sitting with for about a year of like really contemplating, is construction really the entry point? And mainly because we're taking individuals from a really structured environment where there's a real clear hierarchical understanding for communication from CEOs to inmates. And then within the actual inmate structure as well, you have to have a really strong sense of mutual respect there. You can't just like pop off on somebody and not expect that the consequences aren't going to be dire, right? And so taking them from that environment and then putting them onto construction sites, which is the antithesis, like the complete opposite of that, has really totally like held me and Tammy's hearts really heavy, because it feels like we're just throwing them to the wolves, because it's literally a combat zone. These are huge commercial sites with superintendents. I cannot tell you how many fucking fights I've been with superintendents. Like, you cannot talk to our people that way. Like, Tammy has seen it. She's had to like mediate me with these guys, because it's like really what you're saying, Chris, just like basic respect doesn't exist. And then also like communication is like all over the place. And so even that, not just the skill sets, but even the value structure piece to it, of trying to figure out what is a good match. And that's kind of why Tam and I have started looking for other industries, because as much as there's this incredible opportunity for construction, it is like going against the grain in the sense of we can put 100 million supportive services in place, but as soon as they step on that construction site and we're no longer able to kind of keep the fire hydrant of crazy at them, like it's almost like it goes against everything that we're doing. And so we've been extremely successful despite that in these crazy environments. But like, why not make it easier for them and still find them? But it's the same kind of thing of like trying to constantly think of it in that respect of like, who are we working with and how are they going to be successful? Not just in their strengths, but also like in the way in which
And their weaknesses.